Lady Prunaprismia gives birth to a boy in the Telmarine castle in the enchanted region of Narnia on an eclipse night. General Glozell informs Lord Miraz, the lady's husband, of the news, and Miraz promptly reminds Glozell of his orders. He must track down and assassinate Prince Caspian X, who is the legitimate successor to the kingdom. When Dr. Cornelius overhears this, he quickly wakes up Caspian so that he may be hidden in his armoire before Glozell and his men arrive and attack an empty bed. Cornelius then assists Caspian in preparing for his escape and presents him with an ivory horn that can only be used in an hour of extreme necessity. After taking out a few guards, Caspian escapes the palace, but soon more soldiers start to pursue him. Caspian rides towards the Shuddering Woods, where he intends to hide because he knows the guards are afraid of them, but instead ends up falling from his horse after being accidentally struck by a tree. Then Trumpkin, Nickabrick, and Truffle Hunter discover Caspian and see the guards pursuing him right away. The youngster fears the worst when Trumpkin arrives to greet them and orders Nickabrick to take care of Caspian. When Caspian decides to sound the horn, Nickabrick promptly knocks him out. In the meantime, Susan and Lucy are entering the Strand Underground station in London, where their brother Peter is engaged in yet another useless altercation. Edmund will shortly join as backup. When two guards show there, the battle is over, and everyone disperses to avoid more disruption. Peter grumbles about being treated like children while they were acting as kings in Narnia a year ago as the siblings sat together, but Susan tells him that they must accept their existence here for the time being. The lads assume it's each other when Lucy yells out in pain after being squeezed, but Lucy immediately understands something extraordinary is happening. When the train goes by, Susan advises everyone to join hands. The surrounding walls then fall away, and the party emerges in a tunnel next to a gorgeous beach. Peter remarks that the siblings must be back in Narnia as they hurry to play in the water, but Edmund doesn't remember Narnia having ruins in it. When the gang learns that the adjacent castle's remains are actually those of Cair Paravel, the land where they formerly ruled, they are horrified. Glozell and his men also bring a captive Trumpkin back to the castle, which is ideal for Miraz's scheme. A council meeting is about to start because the lords, including Sopespian, want to talk about how they don't trust Miraz since it's highly strange because Caspian vanished the same night Miraz gave birth. Glozell delivers a gagged Trumpkin as evidence when Miraz claims that Caspian was taken hostage by Narnians in response. Miraz continues by saying that Narnians aren't as extinct as people believed and have been slowly reproducing as they awaited the ideal opportunity to attack Telmar. He also promises to track down Caspian and complete the work his forebears started. Edmund discovers evidence of a barrage at Cair Paravel, indicating that the fortress has previously been assaulted. Here, a century has passed, but there was only a year on Earth. They use Edmund's torch to locate their previous royal attire and equipment after continuing to search around and finding the royal treasure room to be still in condition. But Susan's horn is nowhere to be seen. As she sees that all of their local acquaintances have passed away, Lucy too becomes depressed. The siblings start their search for solutions after being fully prepared. They come upon a boat being rowed by two Telmarine troops, who seize Trumpkin and attempt to drown him. They are abruptly cut off as Susan shoots an arrow that lands on the boat and demands the release of the dwarf. In spite of this, the soldiers hurl the dwarf into the river. As Peter and Edmund race to save him, Susan kills one of the soldiers, causing the other to flee. When Trumpkin understands that these four are the kings and queens of old, he instantly changes his mind about being saved by humans. Even yet, Edmund agrees to engage in a brief fight to establish their identities since he still has some residual fear that this may be a trap. Edmund first struggles because he hasn't done this in a long, but soon his body recalls and he is able to effectively disarm Trumpkin. The dwarf now accepts their story and believes Caspian's horn blowing led them here. Finally awake, Caspian hears Nickabrick and Truffle Hunter discussing what to do with him in the Shuddering Woods. Caspian tries to battle Nickabrick while harboring fears of the worst, but Truffle Hunter interrupts and inquires as to his identity. After telling them his tale and attempting to flee from his uncle, Caspian is stopped by Truffle Hunter because the horn is a sign that Caspian is meant to save them. Miraz meets Cornelius at the castle with the arrow they found from one of his dead soldiers and inquires about the horn. After Cornelius describes how the horn may call the four kings and queens, Miraz issues a warrant for his arrest for imparting ancient tales to Caspian. When Sopespian tries to advise Glozell to reevaluate his allies, Miraz interrupts and orders Glozell and his troops to head to Barina in order to apprehend Caspian before the Narnians do. While the dwarf explains that Aslan abandoned Narnia when the siblings fled, that is how the Telmarines were able to invade, Trumpkin and the siblings paddle upriver. Since that time, many of Narnia's talking animals and the trees have stopped speaking. When they finally reach land, Lucy spots a bear and attempts to coax it out of its den, but the animal is vicious and attacks her. Trumpkin promptly kills it and warns the children that Narnia is becoming a more dangerous place. Caspian, Knickerbrick, and Truffle Hunter search for further Narnians amid the trembling forests. The group instantly flees as the Telmarine search team pursues them as Truffle Hunter sensed the search party. They manage to strike Truffle Hunter, but all of a sudden, a mysteriously little monster attacks the troops, killing them all with deadly accuracy in a matter of minutes. When the creature finally emerges, it turns out to be a mouse by the name of Reepicheep. When he discovers Caspian is also a Telmarine, Reepicheep threatens to murder him. Right away, Truffle Hunter stands up for him and claims Caspian was the one who blew the horn. They are joined at that precise moment by a group of centaurs who have also heard the horn. Peter is adamant on leading the group through a section of the forest that Trumpkin is certain is no longer there. Nevertheless, it turns out that the river excavated a canyon where the crossing formerly stood. Aslan, the fictional deity of Narnia, suddenly comes into view over the chasm, shocking Lucy. But the others fail to spot him. Only Edmund, who has already learned his lesson from his previous mistake, believes Lucy. In the evening, Caspian is confronted by a group of irate Narnians who aren't sure whether to believe him or not. Although Caspian blew the horn, the Telmarines were still brutal to the Narnians. After a heated dispute that included a lot of yelling and accusations, Caspian manages to calm the situation down by reminding everyone that he is the legitimate monarch and may thus make a promise to end hostilities between Telmarines and Narnians. After Glenstorm, the centaur explains that he has studied the astrological conjunction and that now is the ideal time for an alliance. Everyone accepts Caspian as their new leader. When the siblings return to Barinna, they find Glozel's soldiers there, who are constructing a bridge and massive trebuchets by chopping down several trees. The gang returns to the location where Lucy first encountered Aslan, since continuing down this route would be too perilous. When the others make fun of Lucy for seeing visions, Lucy becomes irate at their lack of faith. As a result, she slips through some sloping ground and finds a ledge they may use to cross the river. Susan explains she had become accustomed to life in England once again, so being dragged back to Narnia has been tough, especially because it couldn't be permanent. Later in the evening, she also questions why only Lucy can see Aslan. Aslan informs Lucy that things never happen in the same way twice. When she finally locates him in the morning after following some magical leaves and flowers, then Lucy truly awakens and seeks to find Aslan once more. Peter, who has been pursuing a mystery man who turns out to be an armed minotaur, however, stops her. When Peter moves in to see closer, Caspian attacks him, starting a bloody sword battle. After a few strikes are traded, Lucy motions for them to stop after observing that the man is surrounded by Narnians, suggesting that he must be a friend. The formal presentations are made once the siblings understand Caspian is the prince in exile, and the Narnians are glad to have their kings and queens back. As soon as they decide to cooperate, they proceed to find a fort so they may plot and get ready for fights safely. After receiving a respectful greeting from the centaurs, Caspian leads them to Aslan's house and reveals that this fortress was constructed over the table where Aslan had sacrificed himself for Edmund's transgressions. Reepicheep and his crew of mice then proceed to the location of the bridge in an effort to take weapons and armor, only leaving a note that reads, "You were right to fear the woods, X." Caspian X is represented by that X. When Miraz learns of this, he tells Glozel to execute the guards who neglected to guard their weapons and declares that they require a new monarch because Caspian has plainly become a renegade. A Telmarine spy is seen at the edge of the woods near Aslan's house by a fawn sentry. However, Peter is certain that the enemy now knows about them, therefore they must attack the castle while the enemy warriors are at the bridge. Lucy says she wants to wait for Aslan while the war council convenes. Peter doesn't want to remain because it's not really a safe fort, and Edmund points out that the enemy can just wait for them to die of hunger here. Caspian disagrees, arguing that the castle has never been taken. The Narnians carry out their strategy in the evening. Edmund is dropped by an eagle on a castle tower, where he kills the sentry before directing the other birds carrying his brothers and Caspian with the help of his torch. The remainder of Reepicheep's mouse army waits in the forest until the children can open the gate, while he and his army enter through the sewers. When Caspian learns Cornelius has been taken prisoner, as the children enter the castle through a window, he hurries outside to free him, while making a promise to get at the gate in time. Caspian locates and saves Cornelius, who confesses Miraz killed his father, while the mice attack guards and even a cat. Caspian lunges towards Miraz with his sword in a fit of rage, prompting Prunaprismia to respond with her crossbow. When Susan and Peter eventually show there to remind Caspian about the gate, the prince is fixated on discovering the truth. Prunaprismia discovers Miraz has admitted to killing Caspian the Ninth, and she no longer recognizes her husband. Prunaprismia shoots Caspian with her bow out of confusion, allowing Miraz the time to flee and alert the guards. Edmund fights the guard for his torch after he unintentionally loses it, and it is grabbed by him. Edmund ultimately recovers the flame and signals for the attack as Caspian, Susan, and Peter approach the gate to open it. Narnians and Telmarines engage in a bloody conflict that results in several casualties on both sides. Peter tells the Narnians to retreat when Miraz commands his troops to shut the gate, and a Minotaur rushes to maintain it. When a Minotaur is killed by an archer and the gate closes, leaving half of the Narnians within, a griffin rescues Edmund and the majority of the Narnians flee on horseback. Before their companions flee and return to the How with the weight of their defeat, Peter and the others can only watch helplessly as they are slain. Over their ideas and whether Telmarines really have a place in Narnia, Peter and Caspian start to argue. The appearance of Trumpkin's body prevents the two of them from starting a duel. While Lucy goes to treat him, a mother centaur breaks down upon learning that her children were killed in combat. Later, Miraz collects army promises from his feudal lords and declares himself king. The moment the bridge is completed, those troops are promptly dispatched there. In the meantime, Nikabrick presents Caspian to a werewolf and a hag and invites him to encounter the force that once restrained Aslan. These monsters assert that they can ensure Miraz's demise since they possess a supply of hatred that no one can equal. The hag then draws a magical circle and, with the aid of a crystal scepter, conjures up Jadis, the fabled white witch, within an icy block. The werewolf seizes a reluctant Caspian as the hag draws blood from his hand because she wants a drop of human blood to flee, and says she would help them if they ate her first. As soon as they show there, Peter, Lucy, Edmund, and Trumpkin start fighting the creatures to keep them from resurrecting their former foe. Nikabrick engages in a bloody struggle and comes dangerously near to murdering Lucy, but Trumpkin dispatches him before. Edmund draws the werewolf away with his talents before killing it in one blow. While this is going on, Peter yanks Caspian from the magic circle and approaches Jadis, who starts to woo him into joining her. When the ice block suddenly breaks into a million pieces, Peter realizes Edmund cut it with his sword. Miraz's soldiers reach the How a little while later. After finally realizing how foolish it was for him to do this alone, Peter instructs Lucy and Susan to search for Aslan in the Shuddering Woods because he is their only hope. Caspian offers to give Susan her horn before the girls head into the forest, but she instructs him to keep it since she might need to summon her again. Lucy doesn't grasp the topic because she is still learning about romance. Then Caspian offers the lads a solution to buy their sisters some time. Miraz's vulnerability is that, as king, he must fulfill the customs and expectations of his people, which calls for someone to disgrace him in a battle. Before entering Miraz's camp to deliver Peter's letter requesting a single fight, Edmund dons his ancient royal armor. Although Miraz is apprehensive, his lords coax him into agreeing since they are scheming to have him killed. When Susan and Lucy finally make it to the center of the woods, they are met by a Telmarine patrol. Before the Telmarines could approach Susan and kill her, Susan sends Lucy away and starts battling the soldiers with her bow. She ends up killing 3 of them. Fortunately, Caspian saves her in time and returns her to the How after saving her. Because they are both incredibly skilled swordsmen, Peter and Miraz get into a violent fight on the ruins outside the How that goes on eternity. Peter eventually requests a 5-minute break, and Miraz gives him 3 of them. As Susan comes and lets them know Lucy has survived, Miraz confronts Sopespian about why he didn't step in to aid him during the battle. Although it is against the law, Sopespian rejects for private reasons rather than because it is against the law. When Peter and Miraz pick up the battle again, they trade blows briefly. This time, Peter eventually manages to overcome Miraz, but instead of murdering him as is his duty, he hands Caspian the sword. Caspian resolves to keep Miraz alive but will return the Narnian sovereignty. But Sopespian intervenes and kills Miraz with the arrow Susan had given them that they had taken from the soldier. Sopespian then accuses the Narnians of firing the arrow and yells out betrayal, prompting the Telmarines to assault the How fully. The Narnians devise a unique strategy to counterattack the artillerymen's use of their trebuchets. They mine the ground beneath the horses' hooves to cause the men to fall, and then Susan and her archers fire a storm of arrows at the men as they are falling. Glozell directs his horsemen for an assault. But Caspian surprises the enemy by rushing them from behind with Glenstorm and his own cavalry. In response, Caspian sends his own soldiers, and the artillerymen succeed in hurling a number of rocks to crush the house gate, quickly sealing it. It appears that the Narnians will shortly be vanquished. Guards from Telmarine are pursuing Lucy at that very time in the forest, but Aslan's unexpected entrance saves her. With a powerful roar, he rouses all the forest trees after driving the guards away. Back on the battlefield, Glozell approaches Caspian to murder him, but then begins to hesitate once he notices that he has fallen into a sinkhole. The trees take over the field, favoring the Narnians, and before he can decide, a tree root pulls him up and knocks him unconscious. A tree is killed by a trebuchet using a boulder, but a different tree spreads a root and eventually destroys the trebuchets. After that, Caspian and the brothers launch a counterattack that forces Caspian and his soldiers to take the bridge in order to flee. When the company catches up with Lucy and Aslan, Caspian orders his soldiers to attack them. Simply by roaring again, Aslan awakens the river's personification, who raises the bridge and pelts the soldiers with water, drowning Caspian in the process. The Narnians then accept the surviving Telmarine's surrender. Aslan rejoins everyone and proclaims Caspian to be the next ruler of Narnia. The Mice's group then delivers Riepachip, who has recently lost a fight. The small mouse is revived by Lucy's magic cure and bows before Aslan before realizing he is without his tail. Before reinstating his tail as well, Aslan taunts him about it. Aslan then leads Caspian, the siblings, and the populace into Telmarine's capital, where they are greeted by the locals with applause and fireworks. Once they arrive at the castle, Caspian declares that Narnia will be a Narnian-Telmarine federation and that any Telmarines who disagree with this decision can go back to the country of their ancestors, which just so happened to be an island on Earth that had a portal leading to Narnia. Glozell readily agrees to return and brings Prinaprismia's son along, as well. They pass through a doorway that Aslan opens for them, and then they vanish. Peter makes use of the occasion to emphasize that Caspian must now take the initiative, which calls for him and his siblings to enter the portal and return to their regular life as well. Sadly, this implies that Peter and Susan will never visit Narnia again since they are too old. Susan says farewell to Caspian after Peter hands him his sword and laments that they could never have been romantically involved because she is 13 centuries older than him. Nevertheless, she does offer him a kiss. The siblings through the portal and miraculously appear back on the subway station where they board the following train as Edmund laments that he left his torch in Narnia.